What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, the BurlyFishing channel. This is Paul, and I'm here to bring you some awesome tips on a bait that probably all of you, most of you have. If you haven't used it, you've been told to use it. You can go online and the first thing, use easiest way to catch bass with a plastic. Someone's gonna come back to you and they're gonna say, get yourself stick bait, senko style plastic worm, right? What does that mean? That means a straight worm like this. It's usually gonna have a flat head. It's gonna get a little thicker in the body and then it's gonna taper down just like so. It's you can find these almost anywhere. Again, you Google the bass fishing 101s, this is gonna be in there. What kind of rigs are you gonna hear about? There's probably 4 or 5 that you're gonna see pretty much everywhere. I'm actually looking at this bag of Yum Dingers right now. This is the 1, 2, 3, I think it's a 4. This is a 5-inch Yum Dinger, standard, Senko brand, whatever, stick bait. When I'm reading this package, it says weightless, split shot rig, Texas rig, Carolina rig, wacky rig, jig head, or drop shot. That's a ton of different options. That's a ton of different ways to fish this, and they all work really well. I just want to say that first. I'm not telling you that any of these ways are the best way or the only way, or that you shouldn't use, a Carolina rig. You should use Carolina rig. You should use a jig head. You should wacky, weedless, whatever. You should do all of these things. But what I want to talk about today specifically in this video is 3 rigs that you're probably not using enough, or maybe you haven't tried that you really need to try. It's not written on the bag, it's not on this list, and I think that you should check them out. First on the list actually is on the bag, and it's one that I think a lot of people know about, a lot of people hear about, they get told to use, and then they don't try it. And that is the weedless Texas. Again, I'm not saying that no one's tried this. I'm not saying that this is brand new and no one's ever heard of it. It's not what I'm saying. This is one that you know about, that you get told to use, that I don't think people use enough. How do you rig it? Let's start there. This one's probably the easiest one. Offset hook, stick bait. You're just gonna go ahead and whatever distance this part of the hook is on the hook shank, this first before it necks down, that first part right there, that's how far you're gonna put it into the front of the bait. So right about there. Then you're gonna poke it through the bottom of the stick bait. How do you know what the bottom is? There's usually a little ridge here. Impossible to see with a white plastic. There's usually a place right here to hide the hook point. That's the top. This really doesn't matter, but if there is, that would be the top. So again, poke that through the bottom like so, and you get all the way up to where it necks down. Right there like that. Then just gonna spin it and then just keep pushing it up. Boom. You can still, get your line in through there if it's not already lined up, and you're pretty much good to do the next step. So what I do here is I place the hook up against the bait to see where I want to point it through, kind of mark it with my finger, and I just put it straight through right there, like so. And now you've got, like I said, there's a little place where it's indented in the worm where you can hide a hook point. I still go ahead and just gonna take your hook point and just barely nick the top. Barely point into the very top skin of that worm. And now you got a weedless presentation. Now, weedless Texas. This is Texas rig, right? That's Texas rigged. Now, typical Texas rig is gonna have a weight. Maybe a 1/2 ounce bullet weight up your line, and it's gonna fit on just like that. 1/4 ounce, right? Just like so, whatever. You can peg it, you cannot peg it. I'm not here to talk about that. Texas rig is great. I'm not saying it's not great. Weightless Texas is the exact same thing, minus the weight. No weights. Now, a lot of these plastics float, right? Or they have some level of buoyancy. They don't weigh a whole ton. What is the point of going weightless? It's not gonna fall that fast, right? You're not gonna be able to do the lift and drop that you typically do with a Texas rig. So what is the point of weightless, and why should you try it? If you're flipping docks and you're not having any luck and you want to go a little bit more finesse, but you still want a full-size worm, if you're in a place that's got really heavy cover, and when you're dragging it through with that 1/4 ounce, 3/4 ounce, whatever, you're just dragging it through that cover, you're not having any success, you can stay up in the water column with something that's weedless. When I use this the most is when I think I know where a fish is, or I kind of have an idea of maybe there's a fish here, and maybe the bass are a little more pressured. You can slow this down big time by taking the weight off and just letting this on the fall scissor down. You're gonna get absolutely smacked on this super slow fall. The reason a weightless wacky works so well is because it's like way slower falling down the bottom. Weightless Texas is the exact same concept. I'm telling you, if you haven't tried it, you need to try it. You will be stunned at how many fish you can catch. If you think you know where they are, you will be stunned by how many fish you can catch just taking the weight off. Again, this is not revolutionary, this is not new. There's hundreds probably of videos and websites, articles and that sort of thing that tell you you should use a weightless Texas. I'm here to tell you that I still don't think you're using it enough. Give it a shot. If you have already given it a shot, give it another shot. And if you've already given it a shot and a second shot, give it a third shot. This is a great way to fish. So that's number one, weightless Texas. All right, so that was the easy one. That's the one that's probably more common. Now I'm gonna give you some more uncommon rigging options that maybe you haven't used. Talked about weightless Texas. Number two for me is gonna be the Tokyo. Now, if you haven't used a Tokyo, they come in pre-rigged little setups here. You're gonna see a barrel swivel, like that little guy right there, the barrel swivel. That's where you're gonna tie your line on. Then you're gonna see this little stick right here, little metal stick. You can see it's pretty stiff, gonna come down from the bottom there. I'll show you what that's for in a second. And then you're gonna get kind of a standard EWG. You can get them in different sizes, 2, 3, I think 4 probably are standards. I think this is a 3. VMC I know is the brand. I can't remember what sizes. I think it's a 3. But yeah, hook, little stick thing right here that you're not sure about yet, and then your tying point, which is this barrel swivel. First, let's talk about how you rig it, then let's talk about how you're gonna use it. Nice thing here is exactly the same exact concept as the Texas rig. You're just gonna go ahead and hook the bottom of your plastic, like so. Just see if I got my bottom here. Doop, doop, slide it up. Spin that guy around. And then I'm gonna mark where the hook is gonna go in. Bang, bang. Right, same exact concept, and if I want to nick it here, I can certainly do that. And now I've got a weedless presentation. But I still have this wackadoodle stick thing down here, right? Crazy. What am I going to use that for? You're going to use that to apply your weight, right? So in a typical Texas rig presentation, the weight's going to go on the line tie right here. We talked about that, right? Your weight would go right there, and you could leave it moving, or you could peg it and make sure it stays right here. Those are your options. With the Tokyo rig, you're just gonna take your weight. Let's say I wanna go, I think it's a 1/2 ounce. Let's say I wanna take the 1/2 ounce. You're just gonna slide it right here, and then you're gonna crimp this closed, and it's gonna stop just like that. I'll show you how I do it, but this is the rig. This is the whole rig. It looks funky, I'll admit, and it doesn't seem like there's any difference between that and a Texas rig. There's actually a pretty monstrous difference just by having this be able to move and having the weight be below the bait. The biggest thing that you're gonna notice with a Tokyo rig versus like a Texas rig is that you can use more of a finesse weight. So if you were using a 1/2 ounce, right, weight before, you might be able to get away with a 1/4 ounce. You're also gonna notice that you're gonna maintain contact pressure with the bottom just a little bit differently. I'm not gonna say better or worse. You can drag a Tokyo rig just like you can drag a Texas rig. But I think you're gonna maintain bottom contact a little bit better and still keep that bait a little bit off the bottom with a Tokyo rig. Now most people that are using a Tokyo rig, they're putting creature baits on these, right? They're putting like beaver style baits, like larger chunk baits. And it's a way to provide a finesse presentation, lowering down the weight that is needed. It's a finesse way to present those baits. I would argue that you can do the exact same finesse application, get a little more finessey with your traditional stick worm. And again, I just think it's something that doesn't get used enough with stick bait, right? With a senko style, worm. Now, how are you gonna fish this? You can fish this almost any way that you could possibly imagine. Tokyo rig is a great alternative to a flipping weight. So if you were gonna grab a jig or you're gonna set up a big old fat flipping weight, this could be a great alternative for you. If you wanna run something along the bottom, it's a fantastic way to maintain bottom contact. Again, little finessey, but still jack some jaws. Now, the thing that I will say in terms of tackle, right, like what rod and reel combo to use, mostly it's gonna depend on the weight. But one thing to keep in mind, you are still using this big old EWG hook. You probably don't want to have a medium, you probably want to have a medium heavy rig. And depending on the cover, is probably going to determine, the cover and the weight is going to determine whether or not you need the horsepower of a bait caster or a spinning outfit. If you're going a 1/4 ounce or higher, I'm gonna say right now, just go ahead and use a bait casting outfit. That's what I have set up over here. And it's a really great way to fish these. You can power fish these, you can finesse fish these. There's really not a bad way to fish a Tokyo rig. Now the tip on adding your weights, you're gonna wanna use a bullet style weight with this Tokyo rig. And I mentioned you're gonna wanna slide the weight on like so and have the point tipping down, and then you're gonna crimp it and it's gonna kind of stop right there. Now this is a 1/2 ounce weight. Let's say I still wanted to go a 1/2 ounce, but maybe it's rocky and I don't want to get hung up as much. Or maybe I just don't think that like a big 1/2 ounce weight, even this is tungsten, it's still a little bit on the big side. But let's say I still wanted a 1/2 ounce. One trick that you can do is take 2 1/4 ounce bullet weights, 2 of these, and you can slide one on backwards. So at this point, the cone facing up, and then put one the cone facing down, like that. Then grab your pliers and go ahead, and I'm just gonna make this like just 90 degrees. I want just the bottom of this thing to go 90 degrees. So I'm gonna go ahead and crimp the bottom there, like so. And that is what that should look like. Now the smaller you can get this is actually not a very good job. So do as I say, not as I do. Not my best work in terms of crimping, but the smaller you can get that, the less chance you have of getting snagged on things. If you get a big crimp like that and you're not happy with it, you can go ahead and just go a little deeper on your crimp, which I will do right now just to make this look a little bit prettier. There, that's a little better. Not wonderful, but you get the idea. So yeah, tie your line to that barrel swivel, and you can see now, really trim profile compared to that 1/2 ounce. It's a really trim profile. So kind of a cool way that you can stay more weedless and still get the weight that you want. So the Tokyo rig, great part about it, get a little finessey, but you can still have a big old chunk of worm on there. It's a great option for you. Again, it's not like the most revolutionary thing, but I don't think a lot of folks are using a stick bait for this. And I really think you should try it. So please go try that. That's option number 2. Number 1, what was it? Weightless Texas. Number 2, Tokyo. Option number 3 is gonna be a Nico rig. If you haven't used the Nico rig, it's out there. Again, this is like, the Nico rig is not like a big secret, but a lot of people are using the Nico rig on shorter baits, like a finesse TRD from ZMan, or a short, or a worm like this that's actually bit down smaller. Not a lot of people are using the big full-size worm, but I think you can do it. There's a couple of different ways. First is to get a very buoyant worm. The full-size TRD, or I think there's a Magnum TRD from ZMan, very, very buoyant. That's a great option. But a standard worm like a Yumdinger is gonna work, or a Senko is gonna work really well for you too. So first I'll show you how to rig it, and then we will talk about how you fish it. So first thing you're gonna need to do is get an O-ring onto your worm. The O-ring, which is like this black rubber thing right here, this is an O-ring tool. It's gonna help you really easily slide an O-ring onto your worm. If you haven't used one, I'll show you how to do that right now. My deal is, where do you want the O-ring on a worm when you're doing a Nico on a full-size worm? On a full-size, like 5-inch plus Senko style bait, I want mine to be in like the back third, so like somewhere in this area. If this is the front of the worm, where this is the back where it tapers down, this is the front, I want the O-ring somewhere right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get this ready. First thing I'm gonna do is grab one of these O-rings from like the back. I'm gonna slide it up all the way to like the very end of this tube, like so. Just like that, if you can see it. Then I'm gonna take the front of my worm, drop it all the way in, just like that. Now I don't want the ring right there, so when I think about where do I want the ring? I want it in the back third, so I want it right about there in my worm, somewhere in there. Let me go ahead and I'm just gonna now, boom, done. Super easy. Highly recommend getting one of these, couple bucks, save you a whole bunch of heartache. So now I have my O-ring on. What am I gonna do now? So I'm gonna take my Nico hook, which is like more of a straight shank hook. Now, there's a lot of different types of hooks that you can use. I like one that's a little straight shank. I'm just gonna barely nick underneath the plastic. Not going all the way through, not going through the middle, just barely rigging it. What I want is the hook actually to be really close to this O-ring, because I'm gonna rely on the O-ring to like maintain contact with the hook and really hold on tight and make this plastic last as long as it can. Now there's no weight here. So like when I throw this out the way it is, it's just gonna kind of almost be like a wacky rig and just float to the bottom. Then every time I try and pull up, it's just gonna come right up to the surface. So I need to add some weight. That's where the nail weight comes in. Now, there are a whole bunch of different kinds of nail weights you can use. I think some are better than others. This honestly is probably my second choice. ZMan makes a shrooms weight that has sort of like their patented mushroom head right at the top. I think that's a great style of nail weight. This will work though. Anything that can get the weight right at the front of that worm, which in this case is actually the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my nail weight and I'm just gonna put that right into the head of the worm and not jab myself with my Neko hook. Now that you can almost see through, you can see that weight is in there. Now what you got, obviously, you're gonna tie in right here. Now what you have is, if this is the ground, you're gonna be able to hop this along the bottom. Is it very similar to a Ned rig? Yes, but with a longer 5-inch worm, you know, traditionally you're gonna use like an inch, inch and a half style, 2-inch maybe Ned rig worm, or craw or whatever, like a Ned bait. They're usually about half or less the size of this 5-inch worm. With this tall worm with the weight at the bottom and your hook point kind of at the back third, you're gonna be able to hop this along the bottom, maintain contact, and then get a little more finessey presentation with a big worm. Where this is really gonna help you, for me personally, in dark water or very, very, very light water on pressured fish. I find that that's when I wanna break this bad boy out. This is not weedless, so I do recommend sparse cover, rocky bottom. I mean, this is an open hook. You're gonna get snagged on stuff. I would not run this one through the weeds. I'd go with that Tokyo rig. So those are my 3 Senko style rigging options that I think that you are not using enough, right? You may be using them, you may have used them, but I don't think you're using them enough. The Tokyo rig, especially for full-size Senkos, I really think needs to get used more. And like we talked about, like weightless Texas, a lot of people use it. It's great, but I think it's so good. I think it's so good. There's a case to be made that I still don't think it's being used enough. It's something that I have just really started to gravitate towards. I know Jeff started using it, I think at the end of last season, was like, this thing can just be a killer. So if you're looking for any kind of alternative to using a stick bait, I think start with these 3 options. Again, weightless Texas, that should be the number 1. I think you should try that one first. The Tokyo rig, again, underutilized, especially on stick baits. And number 3, the most underutilized that I think you should try more of, is the Neko rig. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something. I hope this is something that the next time you're on the water and you're going to rig up a Texas rig or a Carolina, you're like, ooh, maybe I should try one of these. But yeah, if it was helpful for you, if you enjoyed this video, if you're entertained, if you learned something, please consider subscribing to the channel. Like, subscribe, or ring the notification bell so you can see when we post more content. And if you got a little free time on Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, come join Jeff and myself. We do an awesome live show for you. We love seeing you in the comments. We love answering questions. We love hearing from you. So please come stop by our live stream. And if you don't have the time on Thursday nights, it is in podcast format, so you can find these episodes posted wherever you find your podcast, or go watch the whole YouTube video. You can watch the video as well. Again, thank you so much, and we will catch you out on the water.